my parents had bought me one.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, this is cool. But I didn't really have a connection to it because I think I was so overwhelmed with that, like, I don't really know how to solve it, and it's not working, and it's taking a long time, and I think that it was just something I'm afraid of.
Hey guys,
Fair enough.
you're live.
Hey there.
Hi, I'm Laura Molinari here with the New York Post, and I'm also here with Ian Scheffler, author of Cracking the Cube, a newly published book. And so we're just going to ask him a few questions about how he got into this, and then he's going to show us how to crack the cube. So Ian, do you want to just tell us how you got interested in the cube, and how long you've been studying it?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of people, I was exposed to the cube at a young age. Like I, funnily enough, grew up in the 90s. Like, I had no life experience in the 80s when this was like, a thing at first.
Yeah.
So I think my first experience was finding it at the gift shop in a science museum, and I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was mixing it up, and it was really cool to see like the colors kind of parading around, and it was so pretty. And funnily enough, the man who invented it, who's like this reclusive Hungarian, I like to think of as like the Willy Wonka of Rubik's Cubes. When he first invented it, sort of by accident, he was looking at the colors and he thought, oh, this is really cool. But he was like, it's like going for a walk, but then you want to go home. And I remember that moment of like, I was like, I'll just put it back together now. And I was sort of looking at it, and I would like twist it a little bit, and twist a bit more, and then I was like, it's not happening. Like something's not right here. So I sort of set it aside for years. But really when I got into this was in 2005. I went to this extremely odd summer camp called the Center for Talented Youth, which is run by Johns Hopkins. It's like hyper nerdy. Like the New Yorker once wrote a piece about it and literally straight up called it Nerd Camp.
Yeah.
And on the very first day I sat next to the greatest Rubik's Cube solver on the planet. I didn't know that's what he was. Also, just FYI, like Lady Gaga and Mark Zuckerberg went to CTY when they were little nerdlings, so that tells you about what it was like.
Yeah.
But on the first day I sat next to him, and like he's under the table kind of like doing this with his hands, and I was a little like, what's going on over here?
Yeah.
And he pulled out a Rubik's Cube and he'd solved it. And I was really blown away. And it turns out he was hired to teach Will Smith for The Pursuit of Happiness.
Wow.
Like he set the world record in about 10 seconds. And he taught me how to do it.
Okay.
And it was hard, but not impossible. And then I thought, that's it. Like I actually got in trouble in high school for teaching kids because the sound can be really annoying. And my French teacher wasn't about that. She made us read the magazines in the corner, which being French class had lots of topless women. And we're like, I guess this is punishment. Like, I don't know. But, I learned to solve the cube and I kept doing it enough so that like I would never forget. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago, when I was finishing college, that I found out there were competitions, which is what this book is all about.
Yes.
It's about the world of competitive Rubik's Cube solving, Cracking the Cube. I'm the author. Just came out last month. And so I went to a competition in Las Vegas in the Riviera, which, as some of you may know, is like this famous casino that Liberace used to hold court at, and has since been blown up more or less for the latest Bourne film. Like they drove a truck through the front door, and they're like, we're done now, it's over. It's basically a parking lot that'll turn into a convention center. But I went, and there were like two things that convinced me that like there was something to this world that hadn't been written about, or there was more than just sort of the topical articles I'd read. Well, there were three things. One was that the kid who taught me was one of the organizers. Like in the intervening years, it turns out this kid I happened to sit next to and his older brother were instrumental in creating the World Cube Association, which I like to think of as the FIFA of Rubik's Cubes, only less corrupt because they have less money. But they're in like 77 countries. They have 60,000 members. Guinness defers to them for the world records. And so I said to him, can I come write about it? And he got kind of angry. He's like, you're not going to compete? You're not going to compete? Like, how can you write about this unless you compete? And I thought maybe he wants my registration fee because they're like a cash-strapped nonprofit. But he had a totally legitimate point. Like, how can you do it unless, how can you write about it unless you do it? And so I started learning there was more to it than I ever could have imagined. But there were two funny things that like made me aware that there was more to this world. One of them was, like, this makes a noise, right? Like a little clicking. I don't know if that shows up on camera, but it makes a little clicky noise. And imagine that multiplied by like several hundred people in a tiny room. It's just this wall of sound, and I was standing outside the door in this casino, and I just heard this noise, and I didn't know what was on the other side of the door, because it sounded like a hurricane was inside the building. And so I opened the door, and I couldn't believe what I saw. It was hundreds of people solving Rubik's Cubes, one-handed, blindfolded, with their feet. They were doing pyramids and dodecahedrons and all these things, and I didn't know how they were doing it, and I wanted to learn how to do it. So that was part of it. And the other sort of thing that taught me, like, this is like a weird little world, was I was in the hallway of the casino, and there was like a little kid who came up to me, and he's like, totally nonchalantly like, hey, you want me to lube your cube? And I was like, what? And he's like, it'll really improve your performance. And I was like, okay. And I lubed my cube myself, like any good cuber, but he like took out a syringe and lubricated it, which is how I started learning, like, this is some serious competitive stuff.
Yeah. So can you talk about what kind of cube this is and how many types of cubes there are?
Yeah. So this, like, you know, this is actually a speed cube. Like, the reason I'm able to turn it fast is it's designed for speed. Like, there is the Rubik's Cube, which is what you should get your niece or nephew if you're going to introduce them to the cube. But if you're someone who already knows how to solve it and you want to get fast, you know, you can hit up places like Speed Cube Shop or the Cubicle or Cube Depot and order one of these, which, like, it's like the Ferrari of Rubik's Cubes. Like, if you took it apart, it's all curvilinear inside, and you can turn it fast, because, like, the world records these days require twisting the cube at up to, like, over 10 times a second, which is almost as fast as a slow hummingbird. So, you know, each one of these has 43 quintillion permutations, which is pretty incredible, and every time you solve it, you're starting from a different one. So, you know, you need to have that speed, which, again, is why we love our cubes.
And so, how fast do you think you can solve the cube in?
So I average under 20 seconds in competition, which is, the 20-second barrier is kind of like the 4-minute mile of a Rubik's Cube. It's like, once you've crossed that point, you have a certain distinction to your name. And, you know, the world record now was broken this weekend, and it was down to 4.74 seconds. This Dutch cuber I write about in the book did that. But, like, my best solve is 11, but, you know, I average usually just under 20.
Okay. And so what is the biggest lesson you've learned in writing this book and researching about the cube?
So interestingly enough, the subtitle alludes to this. It's going slow to go fast in the world of competitive Rubik's Cube solving. So, you know, like, have you ever done music or a sport or something where you're just kind of in the zone and, like, time kind of slowed down? So that's the mental space you have to get to if you're going to solve a Rubik's Cube fast, which is really the last place you want to be if you're on stage in front of hundreds of people and you need to use your fine motor skills. But, like, it forces you to be very meditative. Like, it's actually a lot more like playing a musical instrument than I ever would have realized. And so, you know, funnily enough, the faster you go, the slower it feels. Like, I had people tell me that for a long time before I experienced it. But it's this really heady sensation of, like, you lose all track of time. I remember at the World Championship a couple years ago, I just was on my last solve, because you do an average of 5 solves. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to listen to their advice and just try to go slower, and I stopped paying attention to the time, and I was so occupied with every moment, because there's a lot of things you do when you solve a Rubik's Cube, and because it's different every time, you have to pay a lot of attention. You know, that's part of the challenge. It's never the same puzzle. But I was just so absorbed in the moment that I clearly something else happened, because I stopped the timer, and it was like a personal best by 10 seconds. It's like a 33-second solve. I didn't know what had happened, and everyone else was like, yeah, that's what I've been telling you, man. So, you know, the Rubik's Cube is about, essentially, the Rubik's Cube is about more than just math or solving the puzzle. Like, a lot of people look at this, and they see either, like, a totem of the 80s, or they see, like, this hyper-nerdy thing. But it's really, like, the man who invented it, Erno Rubik, this reclusive Hungarian genius who I actually got to speak to. It took me 2 years to get a 1-hour interview with him. But he's a big part of the book. And just to recap. Yeah, just to recap.
We're here with Ian Scheffler, who wrote this amazing book called Cracking the Cube. It was recently just published a few months ago.
Last month by Simon & Schuster.
Last month. And so we're just talking with him on how amazing the cube is, and it's making a comeback. Do you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah, so that's a funny thing, is, like, the Rubik's Cube has come back in this big way, where, like, you know, the sales are up. Like, you know, when I was born in the 90s, it more or less was dead. But thanks to, like, Will Smith and The Pursuit of Happiness especially, or movies like WALL-E, it's coming back. You know, anyone who's seen Snowden knows that it's just kind of baked so much into the world affairs that, like, when I started doing this, I almost had this experience of, like, the sixth sense, like, I see dead people, but I see Rubik's Cubes. Because you can just find it all over in the news. Like, you know, it's a metaphor for the Middle East. Edward Snowden used it when he met those journalists. It's in movies. Will Smith solves the cube. Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Jets quarterback, is into cubes. I went to his house and solved cubes with him this summer.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, cool. It was, you know, he's a smart dude.
Yeah.
So can he solve it in?
He can solve it in about under 2 minutes, you know, which is respect. He actually teaches guys who get injured how to do it to pass the time on the team.
So Ian, some of our viewers who are tuning in, they want to see you solve they want to put your cubing to the test.
Okay, so I'm going to have Laura here scramble it up so that you know I'm not fooling you. Okay, I'm not even going to look.
Great, and we're going to have Steph get a timer on her iPhone
Oh,
going.
I've got you covered. I've got a speed cubing app right here called Chow Timer, which was developed by Cuber in China. This is really global. So if you can see, like, normally you use this language of Rubik's Cube to make a scramble.
Oh.
There we go. Normally you make a scramble, like using those letters, you scramble the cube up according to that pattern. We just had Laura do it randomly, which should be fine. And so you get to inspect the cube before you solve it for 15 seconds. So Steph, do you want to come in here and hold the timer? So we got timing, and in competition, this is how it works. I'm not looking at it. You get the cube, the scramblers mix it up, and then you do it, and then you hopefully don't violate any rule in the 40-page rule book. So this is going to start when I touch it. So I'm just going to inspect it first, and I'm right now looking to sort of see what's going on. And I haven't warmed up, so no guarantees on this being an amazing solve or anything. Ah, shoot, not quite under 20, but we're close.
Wow,
that's
pretty
crazy.
good though. Better than
Well,
we can
let's do best out of 3.
Okay,
Let's get
all
it
right.
under 20 seconds.
Okay,
Okay, we're
Warming
gonna
up
mix
here.
it up again.
So,
okay,
set.
that'll reset automatically. So in competition, the people who scramble are actually called the scramblers. So, all right, we got this. I'm going to inspect it again. And again, this is something I haven't seen. So, here we go. Ah, shoot. Very
You
close.
needed
All right.
a few
Yeah, I got a little
seconds.
faster. All right, we're gonna do one more and
One
I get
more
on 20
time.
seconds. Okay.
Third time's
Okay.
a charm.
Okay, so
Okay, we're
Laura
mixing
is
it up.
mixing it up.
Okay.
And I promise I'm totally not looking. Over here, you can show me.
And I'm not
looking the other
aiding
way.
this in any way.
And just as a reminder, the cube is so complicated that every single one of these solves is starting
Here
from
you
a
go.
point I've never seen in my whole life. So. There we go, that's better.
Under
14,
15 seconds.
wow.
That is crazy.
There we go.
That is awesome. Third
Wow.
time is a charm.
Thank you, yeah.
Awesome. Now, Ian, do you think you would be able to teach Molinari how to solve a cube?
So I can't teach her to solve a cube the whole way, but I can teach her kind of a fun way to do it, which we call the sexy move. And I tried in the book to find out why they call it the sexy move, and I have literally no idea because people say it's just sexy. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have Laura hold the cube, and she
Okay.
can hold any color any which way, like whatever color you want facing top or whatever.
Okay.
So she's going to hold it with 2 hands so that her right hand is there
Okay.
and her left hand is there, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so she's going to do this sequence, which we call the sexy move, which is 4 moves. It's R, U, R prime, U prime in the lingo of cubing, which means turn the right face clockwise once, 90 degrees, the upper face clockwise once, and then you invert those to do the right face counterclockwise and the upper face counterclockwise. We're going to do that 6 times, which will take it from solved to unsolved to solved again, which is a fun party trick.
Okay.
All right, so Laura, I want you to rotate the right hand face 1 turn clockwise,
Okay.
and I want you to turn the upper face 1 turn clockwise. And now you're going to turn the right face 1 turn counterclockwise, and the upper face 1 turn counterclockwise. All right, so let me just show this to the camera. Starting to look kind of messed up, right? We're starting to mess it up. Okay, so we're going to do the sexy move one more time. So the
Okay.
right face, hold the right face, you can turn it clockwise once. No, other
Oh,
way.
other way.
Yeah, clockwise. Then the upper face, you're going to turn that clockwise once. No, other way.
Other way.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
And then you're going to turn the right face counterclockwise once. Yep, counterclockwise, and the upper face counterclockwise. Okay, so we're getting a little more messed up here. It's starting to look kind of hairy, okay? So now we're going to do it a 3rd time. We're going to turn that right face clockwise. We're going to turn that upper face clockwise. No, the other way.
Other way.
Yeah,
Yep.
we're going to
I
turn...
keep messing this
It's
up.
okay, it's hard. We're going to turn the right face counterclockwise. Other way. And then the upper face counterclockwise. So we're halfway through this sequence now, and as you can see, stuff's really
It's
gotten
looking
wild.
really good.
This is migrated all the way from the bottom. This stuff's all going nuts. So now we're going to take it round the bend and come back to solve it. So we're going to turn the right face clockwise, the upper face clockwise. No, the other way.
Other way. I keep
Okay.
messing this up.
And then you can turn the right side counterclockwise.
Okay.
There you go. And the upper face counterclockwise. And we're just going to keep going. So right face clockwise, upper face clockwise, other way.
Other way. Okay.
And then right face counterclockwise, upper face counterclockwise. No, the other way. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we're almost there. We're really close. All right, so this is going to do it. The cube is going to be solved after these next 4 moves.
Okay.
So you turn the right face clockwise, the upper face clockwise, and now you're going to turn the right face counterclockwise. And we're almost there, and the top face counterclockwise. There we go. Let's
Oh my
give it
God!
up for Laura.
Yay!
So you just solved
So it's
the
pretty
cube.
awesome. If you remember these moves, then you could do them yourself.
Yeah. So, and just to remind you all, like, you know, this is Laura here from the New York Post, and I'm Ian Scheffler, author of Cracking the Cube. This is a work of nonfiction about the world of competitive Rubik's Cube solving. There's a lot of funny characters, like the man who taught me the sexy move. He lives in Holland and has the Rubik's Cube in every single room of his apartment, including the bathroom, in case you want to pass the time. And it also does have an appendix in the back if you want to learn to solve it, but it follows my own journey into the world of Rubik's Cube as I try to understand what is it about this puzzle that has become such an enduring phenomenon.
Yeah.
Bye!
Thanks for watching.